All right, hey everybody, welcome to Sound Bites. And if this is your first time here, BITES stands for business, innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, and strategy. And today we're really excited because we have somebody that hits all of those categories. So you might know Clark Rinehart from his work at Innovate Raleigh or some of the various conferences around town. You might have seen him on television, and you've probably seen him from, like if you're in one of the local co-working spaces, I'm sure you've run into him through tons of his entrepreneurial ventures that he's been going in lately. But yeah, like we're really excited to have you on, Clark, and we wanted to hear a little bit about who you are. Tell us who you are. Give us a better intro than I gave.
That was great. I think ironically, I'm actually wearing the same shirt that I, I did the little clip for WRL on. Now that you said that, I was like, oh, that was a long time ago. I was like, I think I was wearing kind of my fun colored shirt, which I'm wearing today. I do have three shirts total.
Famous people can't you gotta rotate,
Yeah,
now that you're famous.
I'm not famous, but my wife would say I do wear the same things over and over again. So I'm Clark, and I'm a habitual same shirt wearer. I grew up in Miami. I am in my mid 30s now. I wanted to say my early 30s, but my wife keeps correcting me. And I'm a dad to two little kids, 5 and almost 4. And so I'm getting gray hair in and around this region. But I think it's still all there, but I'm not sure. You'll have to
Oh, looks
Most of it.
good. Yeah, yeah.
we'll have to check on the other camera angles. And I'm a people person. I would say that probably best describes me as in all the things I've done, probably personally and professionally. I really love people. I know that's kind of crazy, especially in the times that we live in. But I think the curiosity, the quirkiness, the curious things that make us who we are really kind of are the things I'm interested in and kind of what makes people tick. And I think we'll talk about that kind of as we go through the interview. But for me, it's all about people. When people are like, "What's your why?" It's like people. I love people, and so that has brought me through a few different things professionally. I'm an engineer by training. I went to divinity school. Didn't see that coming. I served as a local church pastor. Like what? For 8 years, and really got to do a lot of cool things. And I'm so glad I did that. As much as I never thought that would be a part of my life. I ran a co-working space, and now I am fortunate to really be working on things that I had put on the back burner for a long time, ideas for companies, and working with really cool people and supporting them in ways. And so the through line, I think, through all of that is really just a love for people. So yeah, that's me. And I lived in the Triangle now for 12 years. I moved up in August of 19 to go to Duke for graduate school. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And yeah,
Yeah,
that was your background's really interesting because again, like trained as an industrial engineer,
industrial
and
engineer
then
with a minor in econ. Yeah, it's like
yeah, and but the big thing is every single role that you've had has been extremely community driven, really people driven.
yeah,
Like how can I make this or this better for this or this group of people?
yeah. I'm a problem solver, and I think that's where the engineering piece comes into play. Like as we think through the bites, the different things that are really important to this podcast. For me, it's always looking at problems, coming up with creative solutions, but ideally thinking about the human experience and
Hmm.
how it's really benefiting the capital C community um, a- as the end result. It's not just like all about the process necessarily, but it's really about thinking about how does this affect my community and what's this doing for my community.
I certainly think that people maybe we're on the same age, but people who are a few years younger than
Yeah,
us, I think being a people person is challenging. I mean, COVID notwithstanding, but just with all of the technology that we have, it's really easy to sort of stay to yourself and sort of keep your interactions with people to a distance. So how have you, sort of, how do you engage folks like that who maybe aren't as people driven as you are, but it's super important, especially to a
yeah,
community, to
right.
reach out and get to know your neighbor and get to know the other, companies and organizations in your backyard.
Yeah, I think even I'm a people person and an extrovert. Those don't always go
Hmm.
together, and I know that now. In the beginning, I just thought like I liked people because I was an extrovert. I knew that there are introverts who also like people, and some people might think that they don't because they're introverts, and that's okay, but
Yeah.
that's not true. I think there needs to be space for all of us to participate in the life of our community. And I think a part of my work has been to ensure that access creates opportunity, and opportunity then allows people to fully participate as themselves. Like, I don't know if I didn't, that's kind of just working out that out in real time, but like, how do we make sure everybody has access, or as many people as possible? I like to say everybody, but I know that, the reality is that in our lifetime, we're moving towards the greater goal of more inclusivity, more equity. And then from that access, we need to create like real meaningful opportunities for people to be themselves and to participate as themselves. Not like come here for the opportunity and become me or become
Yeah.
like me, become a people person, an extrovert, go do all this other stuff. And some people don't want to do that. I would say, my encouragement to folks is to find out where they can really use the gifts that they have to participate fully as themselves. And I want to see our community here in Raleigh and the Triangle in particular, to create the space for people to work through what that looks like. Because you don't get that right the first time.
Sure.
I have a great example of things that I've probably done really well in the end, but in the process of those things, they haven't always gone well. Running a co-working space. I knew nothing about running a co-working space, but I liked people and I was interested in what people needed to start businesses and what helped them go from one stage of growing a business to another and to hiring staff. And so I just became a student of starting businesses, which made me good at running a co-working space over, 4 years. So yeah, participate. We need you at the table. If you're listening to this and you're saying like, gosh, I've been on the sidelines and I don't know how to engage, find people who will, help you find that space to be fully you. And we need you. We need you to come with all the gifts that you have. And our community is only going to be so rich if a few of us participate. We need everybody to speak into the the great space and community and ecosystem we're building here in Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill.
We have a similar philosophy. Like we use the 3 A's philosophy. It's like
Yeah,
awareness, access, and action, right? It's like if you're aware that something exists and it's
yeah,
available to you, and
yeah.
then you have access to that thing, then you can take action. And we use that across a broad range of topics. But when we
I
work
love
with
that.
marketing teams, it's the same way. It's like if you didn't know that there was a tool to be able to solve that problem, that wouldn't even be an option to you. My brother does a thought exercise where he asks people to name a city, just name any city. And
Yeah,
then you pick one for whatever reason. You might say Miami, and then
sure.
he'll pick some obscure city from Michigan where we're from. And he's like, "Why didn't you say that?" It's like, "Well, I didn't know it existed." He's like, "Great, that wasn't even an option for you until today,
Right.
right?" So
I'm gonna have
creating
to
those options.
yeah, I think in this, if I ever meet your brother, I'm gonna have to study up on some small towns in Michigan, I think. Be ready. I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
be with like a very obscure
yeah,
canned UP type of thing.
yeah. Just blow his mind right there.
I'm from Miami. I don't even think I know anybody from the UP. But like, is that even close? That sounded like Wisconsin. I was like, oh, from the
No, that's
UP. Oh, is that from the
That's
UP?
pretty. It's
it's
pretty right
close
on.
enough
Yeah,
up there.
yeah.
Yeah,
Close?
you'll
Yeah,
get it right
I don't
there.
even know. All the people listening from the UP, like, we love you in the Triangle. If that was Wisconsin, I apologize. My wife is from the Midwest, so I have some Midwestern credibility. Yes.
Yeah,
The
Um,
fact
but the
that you said
further
the
up north you
UP, I was
go, the more you
impressed.
talk like this. Yeah,
yeah, it's a Youper. No, I don't. Is that I think that's a thing. I don't even know. I
yeah, it
watch
is. Yeah,
It's
enough.
there's
definitely a
bumper
thing.
stickers all over the
Yeah.
place.
Okay. Okay. See, I know enough people kind of from the cold places. I am from. This is as cold as I really probably ever want to be, and it's like 50 degrees outside. I'm in our basement, and I have a
You
coat
have
on.
your full outerwear on,
Yeah, well,
Clark.
I was outside just before I jumped on, and it's kind of cold in the basement. I don't have the heat on, so yeah, I have thin blood even after 12 years of living in the Triangle. If you see me with shoes on, that means it's a professional outing because I'm from
Oh,
Miami. We wear sandals, so yeah,
that's true. That's true.
yes.
Okay, so you've been here 12 years. What do
Yes.
you like about this area? Why have you been staying so long, and why are you investing a lot of your
Yeah.
time in building up the community?
I think it's the people in this community are magic. I really do think we have so many incredible people doing so many incredible things that are kind of happening behind the scenes sometimes. I don't think we do a great job of storytelling here in the Triangle, and it's like kind of one of those best kept secrets. But more and more people are finding out about the cool things that we're doing. I love that I mean, even just practical things. I mean, I never experienced winter in the past, and we get just enough of that to be dangerous here. We get a dusting of snow every once in a while. That's fun, and my kids love it. My wife laughs every time there's like an inch of snow, and I get stoked about it. And she's like, "Yeah, we like that happens all the time in Cincinnati." And then I really love the fact that in our community of it's not a small town, but it's also not a major metro, and we have the opportunity, I think, as people who care to actually shape the future. And I
Mm,
think that's something so special about this region, especially in this time, is in Miami. That's a big machine. It's like I think of it as like a big ship's, like an old school Spanish galleon. Like that's the kind of ship you're moving in Miami.
yeah.
We still can shape something with the steering wheel that's approachable. And I do think that we also have one of the buzzwords that I kind of roll my eyes at a little bit, but I think it's true of this region is people really do work together to collaborate. And I think folks understand in a unique way, different way than some of the major metros and even, regions that we compete against for a lot of different things. Folks will answer an email, and if they don't know, they'll make a warm intro to someone else just from a cold call email. I think there's a certain measure of hospitality, and not in like a backhanded Southern hospitality, but like a true, genuine, like, we're glad you're here. We want you to participate type of way that really makes this place special. And my fear, but really my hope, is that we can scale that. My fear is that that would go away. But really, the opportunity I think we have, because I don't typically try to live in fearland, is to see how we can scale that as people move here and engage in different ways with different skills, different lived experiences. We need it, and it's going to make us better.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And we talked about how there's probably a few places right now that are kind of in the same stage as Raleigh. Like Huntsville, Alabama is probably close. Austin is
Yeah,
probably to the size where it's too big now to be, you move in and you can really
yeah,
command a lot of change there, right? But
yeah.
here, you get a good opportunity to help expand the pie as a group. Like you said, there's a lot of great communities that are really ballooning up in this area. And being a part of it and being able to influence the direction it goes in, especially in the tech space, is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think of Columbus, Ohio has a lot of the same kind of culture and feel as a capital city that we have here. They don't get as much
Yeah.
hype as we do, but I think they've got a lot of core components. And as much as I think we're compared to Austin, Austin's a different type of thing. There are things they're doing better than we are. But I think we're really not trying to become Silicon Valley 2.0. We're really trying to take the core components that made Silicon Valley special and humanize them and really make a space where more and more people, like I've said, can participate versus just creating a southeastern version of the Bay Area or something like that. I don't know. I think those are all really special things that we're working on. And in this next chapter of 2 or 3 years that leads into 5 to 10 years with big, companies coming to the area and investing in the region, I'm excited to see what kinds of opportunities that creates for more and more people.
The next huge one is probably Apple, right? Like Apple's
Yeah.
coming here, building a really nice campus. Like, and that excites me and scares me at the same time for probably some of the same reasons that you just
Yeah.
mentioned.
I'm excited. I do think another special thing about this region is, we have landed companies that fit in general. This is not 0 or 100, but in general fit some of the culture of who we are. And I think that's important. And I hope in the future, we don't just bend the knee to any corporation that wants to put their headquarters here. A lot of my friends are in economic development are probably going to listen to this. They're going to be like, "What are you talking about?" But I do think we have to strike that balance of companies that really get what we're trying to accomplish, even in a triple bottom line type of way. People, planet, profit being some of the core metrics that we base our success on, not just profit. There are other places they're always going to have more money and have more VCs and things like that. We don't need to be that place, but we need to be the best place for people. And I think in the future, those are the regions that are going to win. Are regions where people know that they can invest and they're going to be invested in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I think that sounds awesome and I wonder if other cities who have maybe skyrocketed and become like these behemoths like Austin
Yeah.
had that goal, but then it's hard to say no to those companies and it's hard to sort of scale at a reasonable pace. So, what can Raleigh, like in your opinion, what can Raleigh do to sort of have like really consistent growth that's not going to like, change the core of who we are as a city?
I think it's a really good question, and so I didn't mean to make that sound too idealistic, pie in the sky, like the corporations are never gonna come here. But you're right, and I think there probably are places who are said like, yeah, we're never going to lose the weird, and I still think Austin's weird. I think it will always be weird. And there's a really
Mhm.
great article, I think it was in the Post or Washington Post a little while ago that said like Austin's been saying they're going to lose the weird for like 150 years and they haven't. So whatever. The thing we can do, and I think kind of our closest thing to a silver bullet, is to make sure that we are growing companies, small and medium sized companies, so startups, early stage companies that continue like that we have a volume play on those folks because I think that gives us both sides of the ecosystem. If we can have a really strong base of small and medium-sized companies where some of those like Pendo and other folks bandwidth are going to have great exits and Red Hat, and there's going to be some community investment from those exits. I think that's really great alongside with some of the bigger corporations coming in. But again, my best case scenario is that we're a both and type of place to where we
Mhm.
have a really rich startup and early stage company ecosystem that is in balance with the corporations that come here for the talent and all of the great things, the affordability. Again, in comparison to a lot of other places, it's
Yeah,
not
sure.
unaffordable here anymore, but it is affordable in comparison to a lot of the major metros.
True.
So I don't know. Is that a good answer to your question? I feel like
I
the
think it
both
is. Yeah.
sides of
I
that really is the magic.
My only thought there was just as, someone who's trying to start a small business or is starting a small
Yeah,
business and really trying to hustle, it's challenging as you're trying to compete with these larger
yeah.
companies, right? Even in your area.
Yeah,
So, is that really the mission of Innovate Raleigh is to help these small to mid-sized companies and provide them resources that,
correct.
they don't have access to?
Yeah, I think definitely. I would say the number one thing that Innovate Raleigh does well, and again, I've been the part-time interim executive director since August of 2021, so 6 months or so. And I was so fortunate to be asked by my predecessor, Bridget Harrington, to jump in and for her to trust me with the 10th anniversary summit, which was so much fun and also crazy. But we really were charged 10 years ago as a nonprofit to be the front door of the entrepreneur ecosystem, to be a catalyst and a convener and a communicator and connector for all of the great things that are happening. And again, 10 years ago, things were totally different here.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so our mission and the things we talk about are evolving along with the community because there are a lot of really great entities now that are doing that work here in Raleigh, different types of entrepreneurial support organizations. And so we want to be a quarterback for the ecosystem. So there needs to be some organization, even at our size, so that as we scale, there's human infrastructure and there are resources that get to people who need them. And so that's a huge part of this next chapter for Innovate Raleigh. And to make sure that someone knows that they could call me, email me, send a homing pigeon, and that someone would respond and say, if I can't, find the answer in my Rolodex, then I'm going to make sure that you get to someone who would be close to it. And I think that's a part of my responsibility in this role. And it's also something that I really love to do.
Yeah, as a people person, as a connector,
Yeah.
being to have a position where you can start connecting all these other people and drive the community at the same time,
Yeah.
like that's huge. It seems like it ticks a lot of your why, right? It hits a lot of those boxes. And outside of that, you're also in your free time, you're trying to spin up your own entrepreneurial ventures in
Right.
addition to helping people spool up theirs. So what
Yeah.
are you working on there, and how's that going?
Um, it's crazy. I've always said I was an entrepreneurial person, but that doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur, right? And so for me, that's been a big part of the journey of now working on some of my own things was like supporting a lot of people, like learning from them. It felt like sitting at the feet of the master, just like learning from these incredible people who have done this a few different times. And I've been so fortunate in my life to have great mentors and people who have like given me their time to ask questions. And now I've got 3 fledgling ventures, and they're different stages of development, but they're fun, and they all kind of connect around this intersection that I find really interesting, which is community engagement, community development, and economic development. And so, put differently, it's kind of like we have to listen and learn well, but we can't just stop there. We need to have kind of an inclination towards action, and then we need to create as many jobs for as many people as possible. So that's kind of like the thing I'm toying with. And so the 3 different ventures, and I'll go quickly, and then y'all can ask questions if you want me to talk more about them, because I do need some data-driven help at some point in the future. The first one is Coworking NC. I realized that a lot of local and regional co-working hubs, which are really community connectors. So think of like the coffee shop. We used to travel places, like go to the local coffee shop 10 or 15 years ago. I think a lot of people now kind of get a vibe for the city and community based on local and regional co-working spaces that are
Yeah.
in that ecosystem. I'm not like a big box hater, like a WeWork or Industrious or whatever, but I'm really curious about what the local and regional community connectors are doing. And so I realized with the first venture, Coworking NC, Coworking North Carolina, that I could help to bring together that really interesting community in the 5 regions of North Carolina. So Mountains, Charlotte, Triad, Triangle, and then down east. There's so many people doing so many great things. And those folks, right, the owners and the managers of those spaces really are attuned to what's happening in North Carolina's startup
Hmm.
ecosystem. And so I've been able to get to know them and come alongside of them as a sojourner, as a guide, as someone who's on the path with them and learning alongside of them, which has been cool. um, Trailblazer Development, I realized that if we really want to see spaces that are more inclusive and are more equitable, we need to start designing the built environment in that way. And so many things in this region and other regions are built for people who look like us, white, college educated, middle to upper class background, in tech. And that's not really all of our community. That's just one subset of our community. And so I have 2 partners in that venture, and we really want to see, again, the built environment reflect the community we want to see in the future, and to seed that. Not everybody can pay $45 a square foot for space, but we know we need interesting retail models, and we know we need office space that's approachable. We know we need housing that's approachable. And so we really want to look at mixed use and missing middle and that kind of housing heavy development here in town that will really connect the business and social fabric of our region. And so the last thing is the one that is probably the best idea. And you two let me know what you think. You've heard a little bit about this. It's called the Steeple Collective. And so some of that church background I mentioned to you, we live in the American South, which is still pretty culturally Christian, Protestant, evangelical Christian. And so as I was thinking, gosh, housing has become so unaffordable. Downtown is pretty unaffordable. Other places are super unaffordable. How do we start to think about really developing and building a city that has some of the core components, again, that a lot of different types of people can participate in? Not just tech workers, and even some tech workers now are having trouble, getting into this market.
Hmm.
And sort of think like, where is the space that's most underutilized in our urban core? And so for me, that's kind of inside of the Beltline or 440, like our loop, inner loop freeway. And then, so who's not using their space really well, and who has a lot of space? And I was like, oh, dang. Oh, dang. It's the local church. And then I started doing research, is like, how much space do they really have? And what is that space zoned in the Unified Development Ordinance? So UDO, that kind of defines how we can build things by right. Now, as you know, we can rezone things and, petition council to do that. But there are already properties that are zoned to be a little bit more dense or really dense. And a lot of those are owned by local churches and nonprofits. And statistically, local churches use their space between 20 and 25% of the week. Okay. And they also don't pay into the tax base. So it's kind of a double burn for our community. And so the Steeple Collective is working with churches, and it could be synagogue, mosque, but I just say church because of where we live, but churches and not-for-profits that own their assets, to really think of solutions to activate those assets with the community in mind. So really for the public good. And there's a lot of interesting things you're going to see in the not too distant future where sites and spaces are really going to be a lot more neighborhood centric and, creating these kind of meaningful community centric spaces in our urban core. Um, I don't know. That's just kind of a big idea. So I went to the data side and I was like, how big is this thing? And I found that inside of 440, our belt line, the local church, right? And this is just the best of my knowledge and just like combing Wake County's real estate sites. The local church owns 160 plus acres of dirt. That equates to $564 million in tax assessed valued assets. That's not market. That's just tax
Yeah,
assessed.
tax assessed. Yep.
It's insane. And so think about some of those that are surface parking lots or adjacent lots that could be used for affordable, attainable, missing middle housing, not-for-profit resource centers, affordable daycare options in our urban
Sure.
core, that would really enrich our community, allow for, again, a lot more people to be a part of the magic. A lot of people aren't experiencing the growth and the up and to the right feel that the tech sector is here in the Triangle, and I don't think it has to be that way.
Yeah, and it can help the churches utilize their underutilized assets. Like you and I were talking about how the
Yeah,
Internet of Things is doing that for a
yeah,
lot of different spaces. Like how
sure.
do you take the outcome-based business model and really get more asset utilization out of underutilized assets to not only help the community, but help the people that own those assets
Yeah,
more effectively deploy the assets. Like I
yeah,
think we talked about when we were working in the semiconductor industry, if you don't have your fab at 90 something percent, 95% utilization, you're vaporizing money, you're losing money. So
yeah,
you need to like do everything you can to either go fabless, get rid of your fab, or
right,
build things for other people to keep the fab utilization as high as humanly possible so you can
yeah,
actually be profitable. But yeah, like if you have an underutilized asset, a lot of churches aren't necessarily run by people doing that math, because holding that asset doesn't necessarily harm you if you're not having to pay taxes on it. So you don't think about, we could actually generate another stream of income as our core stream of income continues to dwindle. And
yeah,
the community aspect interesting too, right? Like I think 200 years ago, 100 years ago, the church was a really big community center where a lot of people gathered in the community, and now it's becoming more and more like a co-working space is the community
yeah.
center of these communities. So the landscape's shifting.
The landscape is shifting, I think, generationally, and there are just too many. Like the supply, again, this is not 1950, and it's not doors are open, people just show up. I think regardless of what type of tradition you were steeped in religiously, theologically, we just are less as a millennial, we're just less connected to the institution, and we're not great about rituals and rhythms. And I do think we need to do a better job in marking time in some of those ways. Like we shouldn't lose all of it, but I just think it's going to be different. And so that's kind of my first way of doing some of the community building and economic development work creatively, is to say, hey, you've said you want to share good news with your neighbors. Well, what are you really doing about that? And if everybody in your community, there's 25 people in your community, average age 73 and a half, and you have a 10,000 square foot asset downtown, are you going to make a proactive decision to really see that asset continue to be community centric? Or are you going to make a reactive decision where like someone comes to the check and
Yeah.
you say yes? And
Yeah.
I don't want to say the church in that instance would sell out, but kind of,
Yeah. It
You may not
becomes
have
a
a
new WeWork,
choice.
right? Yeah. They build a WeWork on the site.
well, and again, like I'm not that, I don't want to dog, we work either in that way, but I think we can be creative and do things that feel authentic and contextualized for our community that are not just, gold plated towers.
How do you have those conversations with churches who maybe haven't thought about utilizing their space in a different way? Do they feel like, how do you make them feel not maybe defensive or
Yeah.
attacked, or feel like you're kind of crapping on what they've always been doing? How do you approach that
Crapping on
as
what
an
they've been
extrovert?
doing. That's probably what they think I do sometimes. I think, my particular personality and my lived experience, but also my professional background gives me a different layer. I sat in the corner office. So it's not like I'm coming in and saying, here's what you should do. And I've never been there. I know the complexities that they wrestle with. And I know a lot of people who are full-time vocational church pastors like I was a few years ago. And it's not an easy job, especially in times where there's a lot of grief and anxiety and depression. They have a lot on their plate. And so some of these things, I know you're joking, but as much as like, I don't want them to feel like I'm crapping on them because they have a tough job. They are kind of like frontline workers in the sense that they're dealing with people with complicated issues and families, and they see a lot of trauma, and so I come in and try to approach it from that lens of identifying as a pastor myself. Vocationally, that is not where I get paid, or I'm there every Sunday preaching like I used to do. But for me, it comes with the approach of really understanding what they hope to accomplish as a community. And then from there, giving them options to think through, maybe ones they haven't thought through, but some of them have. And then from there, really creating an action plan. Well, if that's the end goal and these are the steps we could take, what's the first logical thing? What's the lowest hanging fruit that we can do to really consider that next best step? And most of them are like, we don't know what to do. We have resources, we have an asset, we have an endowment, but we have no energy. Because so many churches are older. That's a gross generalization, but trend older, especially in the urban core and
Mhm.
mainline Protestant churches. They're older, they don't have the energy, but they want to see the next generation be good stewards of the resources they have. They just need someone to come alongside of them and help them see that better future.
Yeah,
It's
and you
also
can
to
use your
approach it,
strategic
yeah,
problem
I try to
solving
approach it,
skills.
yeah, I try to approach it with the sense of like, charity. And I missed what you said, Derek. What you said, something about skills.
Oh, I said you can go approach that from your sense of community and strategic problem solving
I
skills to
think
help
so.
combine into a solution.
Yeah, and there are paradigms, right? Like, I mean, this isn't just churches in the urban core that need to think this way. In my mind, there are kind of four buckets, and I'm going to run through them really quickly, of kind of big picture things I've seen. So, a church or a not-for-profit says we want to activate our space, but our team's going to do that. That'd be one way I could help them kind of create an action plan. So, kind of powered by the not-for-profit or by the church staff. The second bucket would be we're kind of tired, we have some resources, but we really don't want to do that. So it'd be connecting them with an activating partner,
Mm.
activate good, maybe a place at the table, another cafe, in and around downtown that's serving these incredible high quality meals for people at different, price ranges and paying what they can, or, potentially working to provide for their meal. The other bucket would be to sell part or all of their asset and meet differently. Maybe, the church now becomes one floor of a development.
Mhm.
Do they stay into the deal? Maybe it's a long-term play for funds, as a minority passive investor. I mean, that's one way. Maybe it's a long-term lease. And they have that passive revenue stream, as you mentioned before. And then the last one is for churches that are really growing. There aren't a ton, but there are some, is really to create their spaces. And some are building like huge buildings now, especially in the suburbs. It's to really help them think about 30 years from now, how are you using those four walls? Because the churches they look at that are declining in those first three buckets, those were churches that 30 years ago built an education annex and said,
Mhm. Mhm.
everybody's going to come back to church and it's going to be 1950 again. The doors are open, people are showing up. And that never happened.
Mhm.
So it's really helping them think through, if you are going to build an asset that is a church or whatever, think about it in the sense of it being a community center versus it just being your space and the doors are literally shut, 5 or 6 days a week. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and like as the cash revenues are contracting in that space, they're going to have to find a way to augment the income to survive.
Yeah.
Like as
Right.
a pure measure of survival, if you look at it as a business, they're going to need to do something interesting and new,
Right.
and
And
hopefully
I think,
they're able to do it.
yeah. And I think that's the proactive reactive position, right? Is like,
Yep.
they know that they have to look ahead because each year they're like just making budget, or like they have to cut staff to make budget or things like that because grandma cut a check for a long time and grandma passed. And so that monthly or annual giving is just not there. And her kids are just not as connected. And so people know, it's just really telling a story and hopefully encouraging these leaders, not-for-profit leaders or church leaders, to really, again, think creatively about stewardship, about how they are using these assets that they have to really serve the community, which I think is at its core what the church is supposed to be, right?
Yeah,
So I'm not
that's at
turning this into a
that's their mission
theological
statement, really.
podcast, but this is pretty much like core business here, right?
I think it's interesting that you like taking an emotional response, like, or like an emotional approach, I think makes a lot of sense. But to your point, like there's also a data driven, there's also just a numbers game as
It's a
well.
numbers game, right? And I'm an engineer. I mean, like what you two do, right?
Yeah.
So I'm taking data and saying we can hide that under the rug for a few more years, but
Mm-hmm.
so it's
It's not
like,
sustainable.
yeah, let's talk about data, or let's die a death by a thousand paper cuts. And it's like
Sure.
when you paint that picture with data, and use technology to really show them like models, and I think people are smart and they want to do good. They just need the tools to be able to do that, and data to be able to make those great decisions.
I think you're uniquely positioned there because you're applying startup mentality and
Yeah.
maybe like some hustle culture to maybe churches aren't known for that, I would say. And so I think
Yeah,
applying
churches
some
are
of
the worst. They should be the
yeah,
best at it, but they're the
yeah,
worst at it. Yeah,
yeah.
they should be the best at it.
And so I think it's cool that you can sort of apply your entrepreneurial background to an industry or to I don't want to say an industry, but it kind of is an
It's an
industry.
industry,
It's
Yeah.
an
right?
industry, yeah.
They move at glacial speed. Okay,
Yeah.
the local church and some not-for-profits,
Yeah.
uh, move at glacial speed. And with decision making, it's like, unless the fire is hot enough to make a decision, it's like, we'll deal with that another time. It's like, oh
Hmm.
my gosh, fire, fire.
Yeah.
We need to think creatively about how we do this. And you're reading the headlines. The people listening to this podcast are reading the headlines here in town and really around the country. We have a housing crisis,
Yeah.
right? It's not just here locally, but we have a housing crisis, and we're not going to build our way out of it. But supply will help.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned, on your journey up, you've had a lot of great advice, a lot of great mentors that have helped you through things. What is some of the advice that stuck with you the most that you play back in your head or you give on to other people?
I think it's never losing a deep sense of curiosity. I think a lot of people who feel like they've figured it out, there's not that interesting anymore. It's like they have one shot and it's just, for me, a lot of the people I've tried to model my life after, personally or professionally, a lot of different groups of people. I mean, it's not like just people who look like me or people who have been engineers or are math and science centric or tech centric. It's people who give a damn, who really care deeply about social impact. And it's people who are inherently curious, about how the world works, about what makes people tick, and about how they can ultimately be a better human and a better participant in a thriving community. And so I think the posture in my mind, and this is like so churchy now that I told you I was a local church pastor, but it's like this posture of like just always having my hands open to the next thing, and to knowing that I don't know it, but I can study it and learn about it and surround myself with people who know more than I do, and be a part of a great team and a great community as a result. And that's how I build teams. That's how I think about community building. And those people that I've watched and follow along with are not always high profile people. These are people who do a lot of work behind the scenes. That I remember this lady. I don't know why this came to mind. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but there's this lady named Miss Fran, and we've talked some about church. I didn't grow up in church or whatever, but I went to a youth group, because I liked a girl. Right, this is like, we're gonna totally derail, but I'm gonna try to stay focused.
Classic beginning
Yeah,
to
I
most
like
trips.
the girl. Yeah, I like the girl. So like, she went to church, and so I went to church. Right, that's how like I got to this point in my crazy point in my life about church stuff. And so I liked her. She went to church. I started going to church and youth group. My parents didn't at the time, but they kind of dabbled back in later on after I started going consistently. There's this lady named Miss Fran, older lady, and every Sunday after church, she would come through. She was like 100 years old. It felt like she was at the time. She was probably like 75, but she felt like ancient to me. She would come through every single Sunday and pick up the little candy wrappers that I probably left on the floor, and set everything up so that when people walked into the space, it felt set for them hospitality wise. And no one ever knew that. She would come on right after, like everybody had left, and she would show up. Never told, only the pastor knew that every Sunday, the reason when you walked in, everything looked the way it should look is because of this one old lady. And that's the kind of like, I get a little bit worn out by hustle culture, but I want like to see a culture of humility like that, where people just show up and do things on behalf of the community and never take credit for them, and no one ever knows. And they just do it because they know that someone's going to have a great experience, or down the road, there's going to be something magical that happens because of someone just showing up, being present physically and mentally, and then someone taking a great idea and running with it because everything was set, the table was set for that person. I don't know. Like, that's such a silly example, but like I remember asking when I found out that she did that, when I kind of helped out with some Sunday stuff. And I was like, Miss Fran, how long have you been doing this? She's like, I've been doing this for 30 years.
Wow.
30 years. People have just walked into this place and never know that there was a lady, not paid, volunteer, that's what she felt like she could do and contribute. And it made a difference. And so that sense of humility and just commitment to other people and setting the table for people to do the things that they're good at is just so important to me, and been so much a part of how I think about the future and what I try to tell my kids. This is all about people. And we can have great tech. And if that great tech, doesn't ultimately help us think creatively about people who have needs and who are hurting, I don't know. That's okay. But I'm just not that interested personally. I want to see
Yeah,
something that makes our world better. And I think that's a part of our responsibility.
yeah, we think so too. We think like if you can be in a position to build something that helps people get on third base so it becomes easier for everyone, then you can, we call it turtle stacking. You can just keep stepping up on the
Yeah.
someone else's back and be
Yeah.
able to be in a really great place. And yeah, it sounds like your Miss Fran is a combination of libertarianism and winking in the dark at the same time, which is kind of an odd combo that
So
doesn't get rewarded enough.
So interesting. I liked. I just want to make a note because I went to earlier. You said AAA. You said we do 3 A's. In my mind, I'm thinking we're gonna have someone come change our tire on the side of the freeway. AAA.
Yeah, yeah.
Turtle stacking is something that I might have to use in the future. That is a great picture of just my son loves animals, so I'm like, we're gonna go stack the turtles, bud, and we're gonna build a better community. This is how we're gonna do it.
Yeah, if you want a better community, you can talk about it, or you can actually take action and do it, and then build up underneath it. And yeah, when we
One
turtle
turtle
stack,
at
we
a
think
time.
of it like all
Yeah.
solutions we can turtle stack. It's like, don't
Yeah.
build something that exists. Someone's doing that. Build on top of what they're doing, and then maybe turtle
Well,
stacking isn't the best analogy, but we end up using it more than we probably should.
I like it. I'm interested in the origin story of how we got to the turtle who has a round shell on the top. But I digress. I digress. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that offline. There's actually a really good story about turtles all the way down, and there's a religious element to it too. But we'll talk about that offline.
Don't give me
Um,
the religious stuff. We don't talk about religion and politics here. No, I'm just kidding. Go
No,
ahead.
actually, now I'm going to do it. So there was a conversation about whether the world was flat or not, and this was like in a
Right.
conference. Gosh, how many? I couldn't even tell you how many years, but you can Google the story. Turtles all the way down is the story, and there was a lady saying that the Earth isn't round. There's no gravity. It's basically the Earth is a flat surface on the back of a giant turtle floating through space. And it's like, well, what's that turtle standing on? Well, another turtle. And what's that turtle standing on? It's like, no, it's turtles all the way down.
Wow.
So that was the conversation, and it's then she stormed out of the conference room. But you can probably find the video clip, and now it's a kind of a common term in the startup world of stacking solutions on top of each other to get to base reality. That's kind of fun. It's kind of an interesting visual too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a full circle story. I didn't expect everything to sort of connect
Yeah,
religion,
yeah.
tech, through turtle
The happy
stacking.
serendipity accidents. So we touched on a lot. We covered a lot of ground today, which is fun. But
Thank
when
you.
we touched about on this through it, but what do you think the future of Raleigh looks like for the next 10 years?
Oh my gosh.
I wanna articulate that a little bit differently because you said something in the beginning where you were like, Raleigh does a really crappy job of storytelling. So if
Yeah.
you could like tell a better story for Raleigh and for the Triangle, what would that look like?
Yeah. Why would we, and I kind of touched on this a little bit in the middle, right? Why would we ever want to be Silicon Valley sloppy seconds? Right?
Yeah.
I feel like so much a part of what I'm interested in, this is going to tease into how I think about Raleigh, but there's so much work right now. And I know that I live in a privileged position in our society, but there's so much work being done to deconstruct a system that I think is already so antiquated that if we build the better thing, so many people are yearning for that and want to choose that. And the better thing is an ecosystem, an economy for more and more people to do the things that are cool and creative and that give them life. This thing is going to handle itself. It's going to go away, and all the people who are going to hold on to it that have been privileged for generations and are white knuckled is gone, right? They know that. That's why there's so much kicking and screaming from those folks, is because they know that the economy in the future is much more sharing. And they know the economy in the future is much more participatory. And they know the economy in the future is going to be more equitable, and we're going to share things better. Why? Because we're about to take leadership. And for us, it's a no-brainer that if you show up and you're like, I would like to participate, we're like, what would you like to do? We'd love for you to be here. Let's do it. It's not like, oh, I've been here for 25 years now. Who are you? And I think so many of those systems, I'm like, forget the old stuff. Let's work on the new thing. And I think Raleigh is going to be the leader in building the new thing. It's not a let's get a shinier, more modern version of the old thing. We are going to be the leader in building the new thing. And so when people talk about Raleigh and the Triangle, I want them to talk about a city that, again, is robustly and wildly inclusive and wildly equitable. We're not there. We're not even close to there. I live in East Raleigh right now, and my neighbors do not care about the number 2 list for the hottest housing market. And in fact, it affects them deeply because their tax base goes
Mhm.
up. And a lot of them have paid off their house. They've lived here for a generation. And so I think we have to think about systems. And so Raleigh is going to be a part of building that better system. And people are going to look to us for leadership in that way. What would it look like to build a tech-centric community that also is people-centric? I think a lot of times those two things don't go together, right? What if we could do the both and what if we could pay fair and living wages to people and still have a really strong and robust economy where there's community crowdfunding, and so it's not just VCs who are making money on their money and having all these crazy IRRs and whatever. Like, what if we were using community capital to invest in our startup economy? And so as things grew, your $500 is now $5,000, and
Mhm.
that allows you to now start your own business. What if we moved from affordable housing and then home ownership to attainable housing? So like I own my home, the home that you see here in the background. But it's hard, it's expensive. And if it's expensive for me with 2 incomes, it's expensive for a lot of people. What if instead of talking about just affordable housing, we talked about attainable housing? Because we know still in our economy that owning a home creates a lot of generational wealth and opportunity. You can leverage your house to go back to school, to start a small business, to start your company, to invest in another entity. And so I think we just have to get creative. And I think Raleigh is the best place right now to build the new thing and to use all of our creativity, all of the AI technology that we have, and really the thing that's most important is our talent, which is not our people. Our people are the thing that really drive who we are here. And I think it's great that there are so many people from all over the country and all over the world who now call this part of North Carolina home.
Yeah, I think we've loved Raleigh for quite a while now, and we're really excited as the community continues to grow, as the community gets
Right,
better, and as that intersection of the tech space helping grow in a really nice community that isn't
right,
like Silicon Valley. It's our own thing, which is great. And
right.
so I think as we get close to wrapping up, I think the last question I want to ask is like, so how do you get involved? How do people get involved
Yeah.
with Innovate Raleigh or get involved with the things that you're working on?
Shoot me an email. I try to pepper in as many. I mean, it's kind of weird now because with the Omicron surge, but I try to pepper in as many coffees or just quick catch ups, chats as possible. So I want to be accessible. Again, Raleigh's not that big of a town. Like, in Miami, unless we plan to meet up somewhere, we would probably never see each other.
Yeah.
This is not that kind of place, and I think again that's why this place is special. So reach out. We're also creating a digital front door. And so that's something that's going to be um, accessible for a lot more people. I love talking to humans. I love that people reach out to me with questions, but we need something that's going to answer some first order questions,
Mhm.
and give people an idea of who's doing what, where they're doing it, and how they could potentially connect to the ecosystem in a meaningful way. Now, if they have another question, I would love for them to reach out to me or some of my colleagues or friends or you two and say, like, yeah, I know somebody, let me connect you over there. But we kind of need a digital front door. There have been different attempts to do that over the years, and they haven't all been successful because they haven't all been, kept up with. And things change here week to week, month to month now.
Sure.
So we've got to have something that is really approachable and upfront that allows people to understand the data and who's doing what and where they're doing it from a company perspective and from a thought leadership perspective. And then also, I think we're known for life science, for biotech, for clean tech, for advanced manufacturing and just technology as a whole, AI. I mean, we talked about IoT, but there's a lot of other things in the innovation economy that are not just tech. And so that's another way for folks who have said, like, oh, Innovate Raleigh is just about downtown people who are techies. That's kind of true. That's kind of been true, but that's not going to be true about the future. We're really going to talk about innovation. And we need folks who are doing stuff at the margins to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm working on a really cool thing over here. No one's really asked about what I've been doing, but it's been great. And I've been employing people. Like, those are the people I want to talk to and know what they're doing and how we can help them connect to other people who might spur them on relationally or be a business partner, invest in what they're doing. Like, let's grow things that matter and make a huge impact. And, I've been fortunate in this role and in my kind of entrepreneurial life to see a lot of those cool things happen and go from being just behind the scenes in, an outpost here in the triangle to really now, being important companies that folks are believing in and investing in.
So while you're building the digital front door, what is your email address?
Yeah, it's the best one to get me at is just my first dot, my last name at Gmail. That's my personal one. And then for Innovate Raleigh, if you're like an ecosystem player or someone wanting to have access or connections in the ecosystem, my first name, Clark, CLARK at innovateraleigh.com. CLARK at innovateraleigh.com. But LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever folks are connected to, I try to do a good job of getting back to people. And again, if I can't help, I'm going to do my darndest to get you to someone who would be able to answer your question.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Clark, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you
Great.
taking the
Thank
time
you.
to chat with us today. It was a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground, and I'm really excited to work with you in the future.
I'm gonna go take a nap now. I think I'm gonna go take a nap on the bed here behind me in our basement while the kids are still having quiet time. Yeah, this is great. So thanks.
Awesome.
No, y'all are the best. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. And thanks for the work you're doing to really tell stories and elevate, not just the profile of bytes and the things that those 5 letters represent in our ecosystem, but really to gain exposure across the nation and across the world. Yeah, this is awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Talk to you soon,
Clark.
All right.
Clark.